Hi everyone, my name is Scruffy. Today, I'm not presenting you any guides for Path of Exile or World of Warcraft, but instead, we're gonna be taking our first look into the War Within Alpha and the hero talent for all tanks. Blizzard was so kind enough to invite us into the War Within Alpha, and we immediately took our first look into all 6 different tanks and their 2 hero talent combinations. As per usual, I have to give you guys a quick disclaimer. I will not present you today any tier lists. I do think that tier lists are really bad. I'm guilty of doing my own tier list for the previous expansion Dragonflight, and I know that people always want to know what is the best, what is doing the most damage, what will be meta. But today I really want to look into how do the new hero talents play and feel. Does it fit the class fantasy, and does it improve somehow the playstyle of the class itself, or in some cases even completely alter it? If you never watched any World of Warcraft videos from me, or visited my stream as well, I really want to quickly explain to you my history with tanking in World of Warcraft. I play World of Warcraft since a very long time. I really don't want to tell exactly how long I play. I'm not the biggest fan of people flexing credentials of like,
yeah, I play since beta, I don't need enchants on my gear, check my logs.
But I've been cutting edge raiding since it came out in Mists of Pandaria, and I just recently quitted raiding to focus more on writing guides, doing content, and even nowadays, play all classes in World of Warcraft. This actually helps me supervising all of our written class guides on yourmmo.com, especially in hindsight to the upcoming expansion War Within. I do sometimes, even very often, play healer and sometimes even a DPS class as well, but I don't think I should be the content creator telling you about DPSs. I think there are many other content creators that are more experienced with DPS classes than I do. Also, I'm not a high MDI player. I'm more of nowadays a casual that spends his time more on doing theory crafting about World of Warcraft than actually doing it in practice. If you're looking for any opinion about tanks in the War Within from someone who's actually an MDI player, I would suggest you to go to Dorky. Dorky is probably cooking up his own video about tanks in the War Within right now, and he is a world-renowned MDI player. I still do think that I understand what I'm doing, and I think I can give you a good insight in how the hero talents play for each tank. And of course, the last disclaimer is, it's the early alpha, so many things will be changed. Do not be upset if I say your class doesn't feel good, especially when we come later on to Brewmaster monks, and take my opinion today with a grain of salt. And without further ado, let's hop into the tanks in the War Within. Starting with the Druid, my personal favorite because I have been playing it pretty recently in Shadowlands and at the beginning of Dragonflight. Guardian Druid is also one of the examples for the tanks today that have the most impact for the hero talents. You will later on see that many other hero talents for classes feel way more passive and feel more like a tier set than a real change in how the class fantasy works. Druids itself can choose between 2 different hero talents, the Druid of the Claw and the Elune's Chosen. Starting with the Druid of the Claw. The main ability of the Druid of the Claw hero talents is Ravage. Your auto attacks will sometimes trigger your Maul to become Ravage. It is suddenly an AoE attack that deals damage to all targets in front of you and will consume additional rage to deal extra damage. The final talent causes your Mangle, Swipe and Trash to have a 25% chance during Berserk or Incarnation to make your next Maul become a Ravage attack. The other hero talents will just buff the damage of Ravage even more, and of course, as for other classes as well, you will get some passive bonuses on damage, for example, Maul and Raise damage, and Stampeding Roar's duration is increased. The actual cool thing about the Druid of the Claw hero talents is the Wild Shape Mastery. The Wild Shape Mastery causes that you can just transform from bear form to cat form for 6 seconds and retain 80% of your bear form armor and health. Iron Fur and Frenzied Regeneration persist in cat form as well, and if you transform back to bear form, you heal yourself for 10% of damage taken over 8 seconds. Especially with Wild Power Surge, you gain 5 combo points when you transfer to cat form when you have used 6 Mangles, what you usually do, in bear form. This allows you to stance as a Guardian Druid, rather shapeshift dance. You will attack enemies and start initializing aggro in bear form, then you switch to cat form, apply a rip to your main target, and then you switch back to bear form again. In itself, during the dungeon when we tested it, it felt pretty cool actually. I think like the class fantasy of Guardian Druids shapeshifting to cat form, putting some bleedings on there, it was a really cool feature. But there's one big concern. It feels sketchy. If you ever played Guardian Druid and you ever accidentally shapeshifted out of bear form while tanking, you feel like you did a crucial mistake, like you feel like you're gonna die instantly. It is very scary, and I gotta be honest, like I didn't probably test it long enough to get used to this. But it's very scary if you pull a lot of mobs and you might not even be very comfortable yet what abilities these mobs do, because it's a new dungeon. It's really scary to just go into cat form and put a bleeding on the target that has the highest HP and then switch back again. It feels really, really sketchy. For single target fights, insane. And I do not have any damage numbers for you guys today. And I know you want the damage numbers, and the damage numbers will later on determine probably which hero talents you will pick. I do think right now that this could be an insanely strong single target tree. Our talent tree was pretty similar to what people are currently using in Dragonflight Season 4. The only big changes we did to the talent tree was on the general tree, because this one got an overhaul, and we skilled Rip and Rake. And we also skilled this new talent Fluid Form. This caused our Shred and Rake to be cast in any form and then automatically shifts us into cat form. This made this whole playstyle just a little bit more fluid, because you save yourself a global cooldown switching over to a cat form. And then Mangle transforms automatically back into bear form. I do think that this is a very high risk, high reward. I do think that you need insane knowledge in what you're doing, what the enemies are doing, maybe some crowd control. It's just very, very scary if you have like a really, really gigantic pull, and I don't know, but maybe single target, this would be great. I'm sorry I'm yapping really long about this, so let's look into the next one. Elune's Chosen has a lot of arcane damage abilities, and there's a lot. If you look at the first talent, Fury of Elune now ends with a flash of energy, but this is a boomy talent Full Moon, as well as a boomy talent Lunar Beam. Is that what we have? But there are some interactions throughout that hero talent tree that will trigger this and make more sense in a second. And please don't point your fingers at me if Blizzard nerfs this. Your Lunar Beam now causes you to leech life equal to 10% of all damage dealt to your enemies within the beam, so you can already tell that we have to switch our talent tree completely. We're now going back to Galactic Guardian Laser Druid. And if you ever played the Galactic Guardian Druid with you healing yourself with arcane damage, I have a surprise for you. Your hero talents will give you some passive perks like enemies affected by Moonfire are slowed by 30%, and Bear Form reduces arcane damage taken and magic damage taken. The interesting one right here is Moonfire has a chance to call down a Fury of Elune, which again then suddenly gives you that Fury of Elune that you otherwise don't have, and then procs with both Boundless Moonlight and the last talent, the Eternal Moon. But here comes the banger. I'm teasing you right now, and now comes the banger. Trash now deals arcane damage, and its damage is increased by 12%. You remember how much damage Trash did, right? And then now look into the regular talent tree. We have Urzok's Fury, the old legendary from Shadowlands, giving us an Absorb Shield for Trash damage of 45%. We have the talent Elune's Favored. While in bear form we deal more arcane damage and are healed for 40% of all arcane damage done. So suddenly we can use Trash. That arcane damage is now healing us for 40% and giving us a shield of 45%. This was absolutely cranked. I have not had a single tank in our test period that was that sturdy. But there's a catch. This all sounds incredibly OP.
Double Moonfire into Lunar Beam, and the cooldown of Lunar Beam is also reduced every time you use an arcane ability, which also then is used by Trash. Trash now doing arcane damage, Trash is now reducing the cooldown of Lunar Beam, thanks to our hero talents.
But the biggest catch to this is talent points. If you look at the talent tree that we used in-game, you might be wondering what I even did there. We are just once again completely talent point staffed. We cannot pick all the cool talents together. That would be way too OP, I understand, but I just dipped out of race and just focused purely on arcane damage. This might not be the best decision, because I have, again, no damage numbers, no Zims right now, but when I played with Urzok's Fury Remembered and Elune's Favored into Trash doing arcane damage, it was almost impossible for me to lose HP, even in the new dungeon with no tier set. For me overall, the Druid itself will probably use both of the hero talents. The Druid of the Claw in single target, because I don't think that the Lunar Beam and Trash doing arcane damage will be very strong in single target, but numbers will tell later on. Meanwhile, the Galactic Guardian Druid is not something new. It is something that we have already played in the past, and now it's just completely on crack. Sorry, I shouldn't be so loud. Blizzard should not hear this. Do not tell them. But anyways, I'm glazing too hard. Let's hop on to another class that is probably not as exciting. The Warrior. And why I'm saying it's not that exciting. I told you in the beginning, please don't hate me for maybe insulting your class or not. Warrior is really cool. I started World of Warcraft back in the days as a Warrior tank. I love the Warrior tank. But both the Colossus hero talents and the Mountain Thane both are glorified tier sets. Starting with the Mountain Thane, maybe you understand what I mean a little bit more. The Mountain Thane Warrior has a passive called Lightning Strikes. Every time you damage an enemy with Thunderclap or Revenge, you have a 15% chance to also strike them with a Lightning Bolt. Sometimes as well, your Thunderclap becomes a Thunder Blast that then suddenly deals Storm Strike damage. The Storm Strike damage then is empowered with Call of Thunder, and overall, it feels like a very zappy warrior tank. We didn't need to change our talent trees for this at all. I know the general tree was adjusted with War Within, but otherwise we just kept playing a regular warrior tank. Of course we get some passive from our hero talents like Shield Slam damage increased and some damage reduction after a Thunder Blast, but overall it felt kinda cool though. Lightning strikes have a chance of 10% to grant you avatar for 4 seconds while it's not active. That avatar then grants you once again Thunder Blast, and it feels like a zappy warrior tank. But here once again, the numbers count. Borrowed power was something that I did not want to see to go out of the game, but many players wanted. And this hero talent right there just feels like borrowed power. This could be just effects on Azerite gear or a tier set. It doesn't feel like I'm actively doing anything different. But oh boy, the numbers count and I kinda like it. I really had fun with this one. The Colossus warrior hero talents are the other choice that warrior tanks have. And once again, most of the things that you do are absolutely passive. Those hero talents give you much utility as well, just passive added on top. Shockwave's stun duration is increased by 2 seconds, making you the best AoE stun, especially with Shockwave now better positioned in the general tree. Total damage prevented by Ignore Pain increased by 15%, and you deal more damage, you take less damage, is kinda nice. The main point of the Colossus tree is the ability Demolish that you gain. Demolish is a 2-second channel that deals heavy damage. It critted sometimes in our dungeon right there for 1 million damage almost. It deals reduced damage beyond 8 targets, and you can still block, parry, and dodge while using this ability. You are taking 10% less damage while you're channeling, and you're immune to stuns, knockbacks, and forced movement effects. Shield Slam once again grants you a stack of Colossal Might, and that can now stack up 10 times, which increases then the damage of the next Demolish by 10% per stack. It feels very passive, plus this one extra cooldown that you now have. Demolish does a lot of damage, and otherwise it grants you a lot of utility. You take less damage, you're immune to stuns and knockbacks while you channel it, and after you're using it, enemies will take 10% more damage from you and deal 10% less damage to you. With all the utility that the Colossus tree has, this seems very, very strong though. I'm just worried that probably comes all down to the damage. If the Colossus tree does the similar damage than the Mountain Thane, then there's no chance that anyone will play Mountain Thane. Mountain Thane warriors do not have the same amount of survivability that the hero talents are granting them. In my opinion, it would be balanced if the Colossus warrior is doing less damage than the Mountain Thane, because the Mountain Thane has less utility. And it's rather questionable if this should be the case, but I'm not the one that's trying to Asmongold right here and tell Blizzard how they should design the game. You tell me in the comments what you think about that. Alright, let's get it over with. Let's talk about the Monk, and there's a lot of issues. Let's start with the first thing. I'm personally not a big fan of Brewmaster Monk. It's just not my thing. I was also not a big fan in Dragonflight that I had such a button bloat. I had a million buttons, I had so many cooldowns to use. I was very surprised logging into the War within Alpha to see that there's so many buttons gone. That statue from the general tree is gone, Chi Wave is now a passive as well. And overall, it's still the same Brewmaster Monk, just with less button bloat, so I'm a big fan already. Then let's look into both the hero talents. We have the Shado-Pan Brewmaster Monk and the Master of Harmony Brewmaster Monk. Both the hero talents had some issues on the alpha. Some of the abilities were NYI, so not yet implemented. But we still can get a good picture of how the effects would be if those extra talents would be active though. And talking about button bloat, none of these have anything active for us. Let's start with the Shado-Pan Brewmaster. And please just consider this more of like a feedback instead of me hating on Brewmaster Monks. It is really important that Blizzard gets the info from us and then starts fixing these things over the course of the next months. Flurry Strikes causes you to gain a Flurry charge after dealing an equal amount of 10% of your HP. Bear in mind that on the alpha right now I had like around about 900,000 life. So after dealing 90,000 damage overall, and this is the important thing, overall, not with just like one hit, I gain a Flurry charge. This can now then stack up to 10, and after spending 400 energy, I'm gonna unleash all of these charges. We have some hero talents that increase the damage of our next Flurry Strikes by a certain amount, and making that our Keg Smash counts as double towards Flurry charge generation. Most of the other hero talents are purely passive for more damage and survivability, and the last talent is Wisdom of the Wall. After 10 Flurry Strikes, we gain the buff Wisdom of the Wall. This increases our crit strike damage by 30%, our mastery by 25%, dodge and crit chance increased by 25% of our versatility. I couldn't even see when and how the animation looks of Flurry Strikes. As soon as I do one spinning crank kick in the dungeon, I suddenly have instantly 10 stacks. I cannot stack higher than 10 of the Flurry Strikes, so just looking at my buff bar the whole time didn't seem to make any difference. You will never find out by just looking into your buff bar if you actually procced, and I was worried that I ever procced. I don't have a damage meter currently, and for the Monk, this is going to be the most important thing. Both hero talents for the Monk are just incredibly strong damage talents. They grant us survivability, but otherwise they're just boosting our damage. Monks are known for actually doing not bad damage. That could probably make them the most powerful tanks by just raw damage. But this number definitely has to be adjusted. On the training dummy, there was no chance. 400 energy is so much. That is the equivalent of 16 spinning crank kicks, even though you are full stacked after just one. These charges then just sit around and don't do anything. For me personally, just by looking at playstyle, not at the raw numbers. This is really boring playstyle. It had no impact into how I would play it. It is just like passive bonus damage, just suddenly proccing and giving me a cool bonus effect after doing it 10 times. Once again, the borrowed power argument. I could see this text of the Flurry Strikes literally sitting on an Azerite armor. But my feedback for Blizzard right now, 400 energy is way too much. Make it like 100 energy and then we're talking. Master of the Harmony is currently called not yet implemented. And many of the talents right here were just not in the game yet. Aspect of the Harmony will store vitality from 20% of your damage dealt and 10% of your healing. For 10 seconds after casting Celestial Brew, your spells and abilities will deal an additional 25% damage over 8 seconds, proportional to the stored vitality. There's a talent included that made me gasp when I saw it. Celestial Brew has an additional charge. This is really great, tanking-wise. And this is the big issue with this for me. We'll need this in bigger dungeons for pure survivability, not to focus my maximum damage. The last talent Resonance was also not yet implemented. When Aspect of Harmony deals damage, it has a chance to spread to a nearby enemy. When you directly attack an affected target, there's a chance to intensify. Also, the targets that you damage with Aspect of Harmony take 10% increased damage from you. So how this played out for me in the dungeon testing it out is, I was just regularly tanking. The Aspect of Harmony was capping out on my personal max life, so around about 900,000, while tanking used Celestial Brew. I started putting a dot on enemies. This dot could stack up, according to the tooltip, around about 20,000 damage per second, per mob that I'm attacking. This attacks then every mobs that I'm currently hitting with Spinning Crane Kick, and then theoretically could further intensify with Resonance. Aside all the other utility that the Master of Harmony is giving you, like Purifying Brew removes 10% additional stagger, this once again is just purely passive. You will probably not play around this at all. But according to the damage numbers that was even shown in the game right now that I actually could track in comparison to the Shado-Pan one, this seemed to do a lot of damage. But once again, I really don't want to focus on the damage numbers today. For both Monk Hero talents, it seemed very boring to me. I am not the greatest fan, especially after playing Guardian Druid that switches into cat form sometimes as a Guardian Druid. This is what I imagined the hero talents to do initially, and just some borrowed power passives really don't cut it for me. Looking at the Paladin next, Lightsmith, Prot Paladin and Templar Prot Paladin. Starting with the Templar Paladin, because he will remind you of the warrior tank that we already talked about. Similar to the Colossus warrior, we're gonna get one extra active button after using Eye of Tur. After using Eye of Tur, it is replaced with Hammer of Light for 12 seconds. Hammer of Light just deals damage to your primary target and half the damage to 4 other nearby enemies. This causes additional Empyrean hammers to fall from the sky and strike enemies, which grant us overall even more damage. Only reminder is that Hammer of Light does cost 5 holy power and is sometimes a little awkward to use. We have a few more hero talents that cause us to spawn even more Empyrean hammers, which is really important for our last talent, Light's Deliverance. Every time one of these hammers is doing damage, we're gonna gain a stack of Light Deliverance. At 60 stacks, we get a free use of Hammer of Light. When I tested this, I gained around about 30 stacks every time I was able to use Eye of Tur. So after the second time, I get a third extra use. Buy 3, pay for 2. Of course, we have other utility talents, like giving us a Shield of Vengeance after using Eye of Tur, and of course 15% more haste after using Hammer of Light. And this is already the selling point for the whole hero class. Additionally, you get like a Divine Steed lasting 2 seconds longer and giving you 30% more movement speed for the first 3 seconds. And overall, it really reminded me of the Colossus warrior with the Demolish ability. You just play a regular Prot Paladin as you know it, you just get one extra cool thing to use. That cool thing is giving you also more passive buffs, and overall the animation seems pretty funny though. When I play a Paladin tank, I always make sure that I'm gonna heal my party members, give them a Blessing of Sacrifice, a Bob as well, a Spell Warding, maybe lay on hands. But I also met a lot of Paladins that do not look for their teammates, which is going to be important for the Lightsmith. The Lightsmith Prot Paladin has the Holy Amendments ability. This is an ability with 2 charges, which recharges every 1 minute and alternates between a Holy Bulwark or Sacred Weapon. This is a group buff. You can give it to any other player or yourself, and another player will automatically gain one randomly, and does the following things. The Holy Bulwark will grant an absorption of 15% of the player's max HP, an additional 5% every 2 seconds, stacking up to 30%. The Sacred Weapon will cause spells and abilities to either do more damage or more healing. Whenever you give yourself an amendment, a random player is picked to get the same effect of it. If you give it to a specific player, you will gain the effect as well. This can already have some cool group buff utility. Imagine you need to shield one of your teammates, you can give him a strong absorb shield of 30% of his HP. If you have a fire mage in your group who's currently combusting, you can give him extra holy damage. Or if your healer need a strong cooldown, you can give him extra healing. You need to keep track of what player in your party does have the buff or not. Because consuming Shining Light, a free Word of Glory, extends the duration of any active amendment. Before I tested this personally on the alpha, I felt like it's a small extra gimmicky group buff. But it ended up being completely strong. The Holy Bulwark was almost permanently up. Your spells and abilities have a chance to manifest a Holy Amendment for a nearby ally, just randomly. Your effect of your auras is increased by 33% on targets with your amendments. Therefore, we also scaled in our talentry the Retribution aura to make sure that if I take a strong hit as a tank, my teammates get a stronger damage buff. And throughout the dungeon, when really looking into the group mates and what buffs they have, and sorry for the standard UI making this a little bit more difficult for me, I actually found throughout the dungeon that most likely 2 other players, including me, most of the times had the Bulwark up. So this already grants a lot of group utility and survivability, plus extra damage for your party members and extra healing for your party members. It is really cool, but it also requires you to use Word of Glories. You should go ahead and maybe heal your party members. Overall, I wish that the Lightsmith would be better than the Templar. I'm really not a big fan as soon as I started healing that Paladin tanks do not throw Word of Glories anymore on other players. I met players in my past that said fuck the group, I'm here for myself, and did not use any of their group utility that they have. And therefore just Lightsmith will not be something for them, because you have to look for your group. I don't think the damage output is anywhere near than the Templar one, plus the haste that the Templar gets. After talking so positively about the Paladin, let's talk about something negative. The DK. Starting with the negative news. The Sun Lion, however you want to pronounce it, Blood DK, has the ability Vampiric Strike. Your Death Strike has a 10% chance to make your next Hard Strike to become a Vampiric Strike. Vampiric Strikes themselves heal you for 3% of your maximum health and grants you an Essence of the Blood Queen. This is a buff that increases your haste by 1.5%, scaling up to 10.5% for 20 seconds. Every time you use Vampiric Blood, this buff causes your Hard Strike to be permanently Vampiric Strike for the duration of Vampiric Blood and increases the haste buff that you get by 150%. And for all tanks, except for the Monk, we know how much we love haste, right? Every time you use Vampiric Strike, you will extend the duration of this haste buff. While Vampiric Blood is up, you will have a 26.5% haste buff, which is incredibly strong. It felt really cool, and there's even more stuff. We have multiple hero talents that increase the damage of Vampiric Strike even more, and our Hard Strike gets a 3% chance per stack of Essence of the Blood Queen to refund a rune, therefore gaining a free use. This is a 21% chance because we have 7 stacks of Essence of the Blood Queen. Vampiric Strike has double the chance of that. The other gimmick is summoning a Blood Beast. Vampiric Strike has a chance to summon a Blood Beast, which attacks the enemy, and when it dies, it explodes for damage to all damage nearby and heals you also for the same amount. You can further boost the damage that this beast is doing as well with your shadow damage, and it felt pretty cool. But I'm personally not a big fan of playing a class that chases after buffs. I completely adjusted my talent tree to further empower my Vampiric Blood, because a 10% chance is not a lot. Every 10th Death Strike, I will be able to get a Vampiric Strike in average. This almost caused my Essence of the Blood Queen to certainly drop off before I could refresh it. I was making sure that I use Vampiric Blood all the time as soon as I can, ramp up to 7 stacks, and then try to reduce the cooldown of Vampiric Blood again to get back in there as soon as I can. And for me, that was a good reminder to also use Vampiric Blood, especially skilling into Umbilicus Eternus for the extra absorb shield. It felt like outside of Vampiric Blood, I never got a proc of Vampiric Strike. If there was ever a downtime of fighting enemies, it was mostly certain that the buff was dropping off. And maybe it is designed to drop off, because it is giving you an insane amount of haste. It's like almost having a perma Bloodlust up, which is a dream for a lot of people, but it made everything a little bit more hectic, and I personally don't like chasing after buffs. But of course, as this whole video today, this is just my personal opinion about the playstyle. Would not be my favorite playstyle. Let's put it as that. Looking at the Deathbringer DK. Deathbringer DK gets the ability Reaper's Mark. Reaper's Mark has a 1-minute cooldown and deals damage to your current target in single target. After 12 seconds or reaching 40 stacks, the mark explodes and deals damage. There's some safety guards included into this ability that if your marked target dies, it just travels over to another enemy, or if there's no enemy, it will just explode at 35% half of the enemy. Every time we deal shadow or frost damage, we gain a stack. With another talent, we reduce the cooldown of Reaper's Mark to 30 seconds down, and with most other talents, we're actually boosting our damage to increase the frequency of getting more stacks. Your Blood Plague has a chance to deal 30% increased damage as extra Shadow Frost damage. Shadow Frost damage itself applies 2 stacks of Reaper's Mark and 4 stacks when it's a crit. Additionally, Blood Boil deals Shadow Frost damage suddenly, and a really cool talent that makes our Blood Plague deal damage in half duration. This once again plays in the Umbilicus Eternus talent, because our Blood Plague is doing damage double as fast, we're gonna be getting a higher shield with Umbilicus Eternus, so this talent might be even more in fashion again. And as soon as the Reaper Mark explodes, our next Marrow Rend costs no rune anymore and summons 2 scythes. The first scythe will deal damage to our current target and has a chance to apply an additional Reaper's Mark, completely new, and the second scythe strikes all enemies in a frontal cone. But that's not even it. As soon as you use Reaper's Mark, you unleash a wave that travels back and forth. It looks very frosty instead of a dark wave. Enemies hit by this wave take more damage, and the explosion of Reaper's Mark deals 20% damage to enemies in a spiral around the initial target. Enemies hit by this effect deal reduced damage to you for 10 seconds. Like the Templar Paladin or the Colossus Warrior, Deathbringer DK gets one additional ability that does not really alter how we're gonna play, and we just play the regular DK as we are used to, but at least it really feels like something is happening. The animations are looking really cool. I'm a big fan of it. I personally don't know what I expected of all the hero talents, and they're being completely game altering. But it suddenly feels cool that I'm doing some frost damage. The animations all look very blue as a blood DK. So I'm a big fan of it, especially in comparison to chasing a certain buff uptime the whole time. Last but not least for today is the Demon Hunter, the current king of tanking. The Demon Hunter is the only tank on the alpha right now that does not have both of the hero talents available, so I'm excusing for that already. The Aldrachi Reaver Demon Hunter will gain the ability Reaver's Glaive. After consuming 20 soul fragments, your Throw Glaive turns into Reaver Glaive. It just deals a lot more damage, and then afterwards grants you 2 buffs. It causes your Fracture to apply Reaver's Mark, which causes the enemy to take 15% increased damage for 5 seconds, and then causes also your Soul Cleave to deal 3 additional glaive slashes to nearby enemies. As you could tell from the whole video today, I'm more in favor of hero talents that have an active ability than passive. Especially the Monk felt very boring, and the Mountain Thane Warrior, but at least the Mountain Thane Warrior had some cool zappy stuff to it happening. The active ability of the Demon Hunter does just not feel good. At least on the alpha, without any tier set from season 3, 20 soul fragments seemed so incredibly much. All the other hero talents, except for 2, are further increasing the effects of the enhancements of Soul Cleave and Fracture. They're just gonna deal more damage, they're gonna hit additional times, they reduce the cooldown of the hunt, and spawn more soul fragments. The other 2 utility talents that we have is Vengeful Retreat resets the cooldown of Fellblade, or you can use Vengeful Retreat a second time within 3 seconds, and Fellblade itself giving you then a physical damage taken reduction by 10% for 5 seconds. As soon as you use both of the enhanced abilities, you gain 15% more attack speed for 5 seconds only, and your next random ability to use deals 30% more damage. Let's say your Spirit Bomb in AoE. But what worries me the most about this is escalation. Each successive enhanced ability deals 10% increased damage. The effect of the second enhancement is increased by 100%. When I'm on single target and I'm just fighting a regular boss, after 20 soul fragments, I use Throw Glaive, which is very unintuitive for now. Then I have to think about which of the both enhancements do I want to double the effect. Is it Fracture with the Reaver's Mark that causes the enemy to take more damage for a certain amount of time? Or do I want to slash more enemies with Soul Cleave? In AoE, I have to use that Throw Glaive and then use the correct combination of then first Fracture, then Soul Cleave to do even more AoE damage. All of this seemed very unintuitive. The Demon Hunter has the first active ability today that I'm just really not a fan of. I'm not personally not the biggest fan of getting restrictions in how to play and telling me that I'm not allowed to misclick a certain ability. If I really wanted to be punished for misclicking an ability in my rotation, I would just play Arcane Mage. Please consider everything that I said today in this video as just feedback. It is so early into the alpha, and we can all agree on that Blizzard has learned a lot from player feedback recently. Look at the Oracle Priest, where they doubled and tripled down on power infusion, and after player feedback, they completely changed it again. There's so much tuning that needs to go into these. I'm pretty happy that didn't show any damage, even though I want to know it myself. I really wanted to feel myself if any of the tanks feel different. Do even the passives of certain classes feel strong? The Master of Harmony Monk could feel really strong with an insane debuff extra just added on top. The Mountain Thane just zaps around and has a cool animation. My biggest wish for War Within is balancing the hero talents. I think Guardian Druid is a good example currently, and sorry for glazing the Guardian Druid so much, that we would be probably playing both of the hero talents. I would personally love to see hero talents being more of a choice than a Zimbait, where everyone follows a certain thing. If you feel more of a group utility Paladin, you do this. If you just feel like you just want to stomp an enemy with hammers, then you play the other Paladin. This should be the only takeaway from this video, and I hope you liked it. I usually do just guide videos about World of Warcraft and Path of Exile here on my YouTube channel, and if you liked the video, just let me know by pressing that like button and maybe subscribe for more videos. I will definitely do some damage overviews as soon as they're gonna release towards the beta for sure. And until then, the algorithm thinks you would enjoy this video next.